From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Ecuador's main indigenous organizations have said there are no negotiations with the government and their struggle will continue. Jaime Vargas, the president of CONDEMN, said there could be no solution until the repression ends. The ministers responsible are brought to justice, the economic measures are repealed, and the IMF gets out of Ecuador. 3 indigenous protesters were killed on Wednesday.
With the blood of our brothers, we are not going to negotiate any agreement with this de facto, lying, thieving government. This government, this gentleman, Lenin Moreno, should go to prison for his crimes against our brothers. Mr. Policeman, you have a heart, you have a brain. You are human beings like us. We are all the people. You must not be murderers. We are your brothers. We struggle for our cause and our children.
We've been fighting since last Thursday.
One day after facing heavy police repression, indigenous people have regrouped at the National Cultural Center in Quito. They were able to apprehend 8 police officers who they threatened to punish with indigenous justice. The protesters offered to release the officers unharmed if security forces surrounding the area back away and if national media outlets broadcast live this gathering.
We have one of the dead right here. We will hold a mass for him, but that comrade who went to heaven, who will live in our hearts, he will give us strength because we need to defeat this government. We need your will and your strength because us indigenous people are not expecting to be handed food and water. We are like the grass in the fields. We will plant ourselves right here. We will not go down on our knees and we will not back down.
Our correspondent, Estefania Bravo, is with the indigenous movements in Quito. She sent this report earlier.
Hello, I am here in the Agora de la Casa de la Cultura in the north center of Quito. And as you can tell, the indigenous movements have come here. They are still, this is the 8th day of the strike, and they are still demanding President Lenin Moreno to eliminate the decree that eliminates subsidies to gasoline. They are here. They have come with their families, and they are saying that they won't give up, that they are not in negotiations with the government, and that they are still here and they will remain here until the government eliminates the decree. For them, there is no other option than for the government to eliminate the decree. They have also detained 8 policemen here. Let's recall that yesterday, 3 of the people of the indigenous movement were killed by police forces. So they are going to bring the bodies of the 3 people that were killed yesterday, of the 3 protesters that were killed yesterday, and they will bring them here so they can have a ceremony. They are also saying that they are not in negotiations with the government. They are asking for President Lenin Moreno to leave and also for them to eliminate the subsidies. They have also asked the communications, the media, for them to go live with this event because they say that the media here in Ecuador has not said the truth, and they are also demanding the media to say the truth. So we will be here the whole day, and we will continue to update you with more information.
That was Estefania Bravo with that report. Citizens in Quito have continued to donate supplies and provide aid to the indigenous protesters. Collection centers have been set up in 2 universities in Quito and at the National Cultural Center, where citizens have been bringing food, water, medical supplies and toiletries for the protesters. On Wednesday night, these very centers were the target of police violence as tear gas canisters were fired inside.
Since the first day of protests, we have provided food and shelter to around 600 people. On the second day, we helped around 4,000 people. And just yesterday, we provided help to around 3,200 people. Last night, the police fired tear gas into our shelters, and some people were forced to leave. We have set up 3 tents, and each one provides food for around 3,000 to 4,000 people. At night time, we have 28 indigenous communities inside the shelter, and our volunteer groups give priority to women and children. We want to thank people for giving us food donations. All 4 universities have also helped to ensure that groceries and water are distributed to everyone. We suggest people do not donate perishable food items. We need canned food, water, cutlery, cups and plates, and most importantly, medication.
There are now 6 provinces where demonstrators have occupied or taken control of the governorships, which are the regional representatives of the national government. In the Central Highlands, indigenous and other social movements stormed the governor's offices in Bolivar, Chimborazo and Cañar. In the eastern Amazonian region, Napo, Pastaza and Morona, Santiago also saw protesters take over. In some cases, they have elected their own representatives to replace the governor. Indigenous communities continue to mobilize across Ecuador. These are the people of Quisapincha who descended on the provincial capital of Ambato in the Central Highlands. It is not clear if they will later head for Quito, but several indigenous communities from the Amazon region of Ecuador are on their way to the capital to join the protesters there. Now, Wednesday saw the country brought to a halt by a general strike. Let's now take a look at how the day developed.
Another day of massive popular protests in Quito. From early morning, social movements and indigenous groups gathered at the Arbolito Park and then marched towards the historic center of the capital. They wanted to reach the Carandore Palace, the seat of the presidency. The police and the army stopped the marchers from reaching their destination. They used tear gas and barricades to block their path. The demonstrators insist that in spite of the repression, they will not give up the struggle for their rights.
The Interior Minister, Romo, should be tried and put in prison for all this. And the only thing left for Lenin Moreno to do is run away, because the indigenous movement and all the popular classes won't give up until he steps down. He has got to go.
But Quito is not the only place people are protesting against President Lenin Moreno's decree, which, among other austerity measures, eliminates the subsidies for fuel. In Guayaquil, where the government has temporarily moved its operations, there are also demonstrations. These are the biggest protests in Ecuador for decades, provoked by deep anger at the government's decision to try and force through a package of neoliberal measures dictated by international financial institutions like the IMF.
Ecuadorians in the United States have also been protesting against the International Monetary Fund-pushed austerity measures. A number of Ecuadorians entered the office of the IMF Special Representative to the United Nations in New York in order to reject their government's deal with the organization, which will disproportionately affect the working class. Carrying banners and the indigenous plurinational flag, the protesters called for the IMF to take its hands off Ecuador. Shifting gears now, Cuba's National Assembly has elected Miguel DIAZ-CANEL as the President of the Republic, a post restored under the new constitution. A special session of the Assembly of Popular Power voted 579 in favor of the 59-year-old leader. Up until now, DIAZ-CANEL has held the post of President of the Council of State, a position which disappears with the reforms introduced to the Constitution. Salvador Valdez Mesa was elected Vice President. and Esteban Lazo was elected as President of the National Assembly.
Considering the results given, I declare the Congressman Miguel Diaz-CANEL Bermudez is elected as the President of the Republic of Cuba.
Ahead of the session, Cuban citizens said they hoped and expected DIAZ-CANEL would be reconfirmed as Cuba's head of state.
The most capable person should be selected, the one who's best capable to represent the country, who has new and diverse perspectives so that we can move forward.
I am very happy with him. He really has the ideals of our revolution. I am happy and grateful for his leadership.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, flooding is reported across Trinidad following heavy rains. We'll have details after this. Welcome back. Several parts of Trinidad and Tobago, including the capital city Port of Spain, have flooded after persistent rainfall. Rising floodwaters in the capital reportedly left many marooned in their workplaces. The flash flooding was as a result of the passage of the Intertropical Convergence Zone. An adverse weather alert yellow level has been in effect since early Wednesday morning. In Antigua and Barbuda, opposition leader of the United Progressive Party, or UPP, Harold Lovell, and two other former cabinet ministers, Wilmoth Daniel and Dr. Jackie Quinn, have been charged with corruption, fraud, larceny and embezzlement. The decision comes more than 2 years after a magistrate dismissed a case against the trio in relation to buses that were donated to the government during their tenure. The judge had ruled that the evidence was scant, to say the least. It is alleged that the trio converted 3 Daewoo buses worth more than $600,000 that had been donated by the government of South Korea for their personal use.
Of yellow and blue.
CARICOM continues to demand reparations for the enduring suffering inflicted by the Atlantic slave trade, while also examining the challenges to the region's economic and political independence posed by international finance systems and the current debt crisis in the region. Caribbean leaders are discussing these concerns at a CARICOM reparations symposium currently underway in Antigua and Barbuda.
We cannot forget that our European oppressors not only exploited us, but left us all in a condition of extreme poverty, mass illiteracy, inadequate health and educational institutions, and a pandemic of chronic debilitating NCDs deriving from centuries of salt and sugar consumption. Now, the Europeans utilize an inhumane model, what I consider to be a brutal extractive economic model, to control the Caribbean as a zone of wealth creation to fund their own development.
Montserrat Premier Donaldson Romeo has been ousted as leader of the ruling People's Democratic Movement just ahead of the November 18th general election. He was reportedly voted out 6-2 by his colleagues, who have long been upset over his leadership. It is unclear if Romeo will continue to serve as Premier in the interim. The Legislative Assembly was dissolved by force on Tuesday, 1 day after he announced the election date. The Minister of Works, Communication, Energy and Labour, Paul Merks, has since been selected to lead the party.
High standards of education.
In other news, Ghana's state prosecutor has charged 9 people with treason after they were accused of plotting to overthrow the government. They were arrested last month for allegedly plotting to seize key state installations with the aim of overthrowing President Nana Akufo-Addo. According to the state prosecutor, the accused were part of a group known as Take Action Ghana and had planned to stage a series of protests with the purpose of destabilizing the country. The prosecutor added that the group engaged the services of a local blacksmith to manufacture pistols and explosives to enable them to execute their plan. Tunisia's Islamist party Ennahda, led by Rached Ghannouchi, has topped the legislative polls with 52 seats but fell short of the majority required to form a government. Presidential candidate Nabil Karoui's Kalb Tunis party came second with 38 seats, while independent candidates scooped 33 seats. Ennahda will need to negotiate a coalition deal with other parties to be able to run the country for the next 5 years. On Sunday, retired law professor K. Said faces Karoui in the second round of the presidential election. The World Health Organization says the Ebola epidemic has been squeezed into a much smaller geographic area in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The epidemic has killed more than 2,000 people since August 2018, causing the WHO to declare it an international public health emergency.
Containing a virus is a different prospect to eliminating that virus from human populations, and at this point we have to ensure that we push the virus completely out of the human population, and we need to do that as quickly as we can, while being very careful to continue to keep the community on board and to protect our staff and ensure our staff have the proper enabling environment in which to do their work safely.
The Nigerian Senate has reintroduced an anti-sexual harassment bill that seeks to prevent the victimization of university students. This follows a media investigation which exposed widespread sexual misconduct by multiple lecturers at 2 top West African universities. The bill proposes a prison term of between 5 and 14 years for lecturers who have a sexual relationship with their students. Once passed, it will also be illegal for lecturers to make sexual advances towards students. With more than 1 million inhabitants, the Brazilian city of Maceió in the northeastern state of Alagoas is well known for its beautiful beaches and lagoons. But in 4 neighborhoods around the city, 45,000 citizens are seeing their dreams and their homes disappear.
Empty streets and houses. It looks like a ghost city, but it's actually a neighborhood called Pinheiro in the city of Maceió, the capital of Alagoas. Eliane invites us to see a house which she had to abandon 8 years ago. A broken house and broken dreams as well.
Every day we are back here, it's worse. The ground keeps moving and the cracks are growing too.
76 years old, José João shares a small house with his son and his wife at the edge of a cliff, but the walls are cracking. It's the same situation as other houses that had to be abandoned.
There were already cracks before the earthquake that struck 18 months ago. After it, the cracks grew.
At the edge of the Mundão Lagoon, the Braskem company has been extracting minerals from the ground since the 70s, in particular halite, a mineral similar to sodium chloride. The Pinheiro neighborhood has a history of sinking since it was built over a geological fault, but the 35 halite mines add to this issue. After heavy rains in February 2018 and a 2.4 Richter scale earthquake in March of the same year, the situation worsened. A study from the Brazilian Geological Service, published in April 2019, was very clear.
The main reason for the sinking of the Pinheiro neighborhood is linked to the halite extraction.
Local movements such as SOS Pinheiro and other international bodies demand an urgent solution to the situation and point out that the lagoon and removing huge amounts of earth are a dangerous combination.
I believe that behind all this, there's mining companies, but there's also the interest of the real estate business.
We are here to build a popular movement of sovereignty in mining and to demand from the company to work with respect and dignity for all the affected people.
The Braskem company has been fined more than $7 million for giving false information about its impact in the region. But it ensures that the studies are being carried out in 18 mines until December. The Alagoas Environmental Institute is tracking the situation, but for now, the mines have been cleared.
Coming up, Turkey's president has dismissed international criticism of his country's military offensive in Syria. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has rejected international criticism of his country's military operations in northeast Syria, as he reported on the progress of the second day since Turkish troops entered the Kurdish-controlled territory.
Since the beginning of the operation, 109 terrorists have been killed so far, just like all the other operations carried out by Turkey. The aim of the peace sprint is to contribute to Syria's territorial and political integrity. Saudi Arabia should look into the mirror. Who brought Yemen to this state? Look at its current condition. Did tens of thousands of people not die in Yemen? Hey, Saudi Arabia, give account for this first.
Erdogan's words come a day after the Turkish military arrived at the Syrian border. A military convoy reached Syria and drove along the border, crossing into the northern side of the country. This marked the beginning of ground operations after having attacked Kurdish militia positions in northeast Syria with airstrikes and artillery barrages in a cross-border military operation. And all this just days after U.S. troops pulled back from the area. Meanwhile, police have detained at least 5 protesters in Diyarbakir, the largest city in mainly Kurdish southeast Turkey, for criticizing the military attack against Kurdish militia in the northeast. Police used water cannons to disperse the gathering, which was initially called against the ousting of elected mayors of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, but it turned into a protest against the Turkish military operation in Syria. Meanwhile, a senior Kurdish official has warned that Islamic State militants could break out of prisons in northeast Syria after one of the prisons was bombed by Turkish planes.
One of the prisons in which the ISIS prisoners are kept under the control of Syrian Democratic Force was bombed by Turkish warplanes yesterday, and probably some of the ISIS members have escaped from this prison. We want an urgent intervention on this crisis, and these attacks should be stopped immediately. The airspace should be closed for Turkish flights that bombing attacks, air attacks can be stopped. And all European states should freeze their relations by withdrawing their ambassadors from Turkey immediately.
Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has struck a more positive tone than other European leaders on a possible Brexit deal. Coming out of what he called a very positive meeting with his British counterpart Boris Johnson, the Irish leader expressed confidence that a Brexit deal was still possible by October 31st. And he says both he and Johnson do see a pathway to an agreement in the coming weeks. However, Varadkar says there still remains 2 issues to be ironed out, ensuring that any long-term agreement has the consent of the people of Northern Ireland and that there is no customs border on the island of Ireland.
Yeah, as I say, we agreed not to get into the details of any proposals or discussions made, but on the timeline question, I think it is possible for us to come to an agreement to have a treaty agreed to allow the UK to leave the EU in an orderly fashion and to have that done by the end of October. But there is many a slip between cup and lip and lots of things that are not in my control.
And we end in North Korea, where the country has celebrated the 74th founding anniversary of the nation's ruling party. People gathered under the statues of the country's founder Kim Il-sung and the late leader Kim Jong-il to pay tribute by laying flowers at their feet. Founded in 1945, the WPK states that its primary objective is political, economic and military independence for North Korea. That brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telasurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.